Conor McGregor versus USADA, the fight that is brewing, right? This isn't happening yet, and I can't guarantee it's going to. But what I can guarantee is both sides accept. Neither one is going to back down, and that's very uncommon. That's very uncommon. USADA has a tremendous amount of power. They have a tremendous amount of authority. And that doesn't just come from the structure of their business. It comes from the fact that if you want to test that authority or you want to test a decision made by USADA, it could cost you your career. It could very easily take you 2 to 3 years to resolve a matter. That if you just accept it and went along with, is going to be 6 months. So you got principle and you don't like it. I'm not going to like it, but I can get back to work and I have a family. I mean, really, you can do that. They have a lot of power because of that. And they are not in the same shoes. If they go and make a decision, even one that turns out to be egregious, they don't miss a day of work. There's not anybody at USADA that's out 2 to 3 years. There's not anybody at USADA that has to go lawyer up and go through this and the stresses and read their name in the headlines and attempt to correct stories. None of it. And it gives them a real power. And I'm only sharing this with you because Conor McGregor has made it very clear that's not the way it's going to be with him. And I find that interesting. I do find that interesting because one should not have power due to a threat or leverage that they could have over somebody, particularly when it's bigger and smaller. Do you remember when Kamala Harris came out to explain the Russian invasion of Ukraine? She got teased. She came out and she said Russia, which is a big country in Europe, invaded Ukraine, which is a small country in Europe, and that's not good. This is what she said. They teased her. That was great. That was great. It was very simplistic. That's what it was. It was really bad. You get these really big guys picking on these really little guys. I mean, just from a sympathy standpoint, that's not right. And that's what she said. I mean, I've got to tell her. Because Conor is digging in and he has let them know you do not have the whip side here. And that was a very interesting statement for me. It was a very interesting statement by Conor McGregor. He broke it down. He did it real quickly. I mean, this was only a couple of paragraphs. I just took them with me. I don't know that Conor meant them to be as big as I interpreted them. But Conor did spell out, you guys are a $10.4 million expense. I will make the company $50 million tonight. And all of a sudden, you got a really good point. When you have an agency who isn't just using junk science and authority, they're using the fact that you must exhaust your administrative options, and that could cost you the time of your career. Ask Nick Diaz, who missed 5 years. Ask Wanderlei Silva, who never got back in. Ask Josh Barnett, who had his name ran through the mud and was eventually cleared. I mean, not for nothing. It's a really tough spot, and I think we can all agree it shouldn't be that way. It should be very above board. And you should not, just through a point of leverage or to win in a headline, go and tie somebody up, make them lawyer up, and threaten them and use it that way. You just shouldn't do it. That's egregious. Now, the article that will ultimately be called into question, okay? And Dana White spoke on this as recently as this weekend, and he said, Conor McGregor's not back in the pool. Before we go anywhere with the Chandler fight or start to get announced, Conor's got to get in the pool. Very respectful by Dana. Very respectful of USADA. Or of Dana towards USADA. But how accurate is it? It's not been tested. People have their opinions, including myself. It's not yet been tested. And I got to bring that because you'll meet people in life all the time, and you're probably one of them. They'll tell somebody what the rules are. Police officer pulls you over. He wants your ID, and you're one of those guys who's trying to make a TikTok video and tells me I don't have to give you my ID unless I'm suspected of a crime. State Code 104, my constitutional amendment, number 17. I mean, you're one of these guys. It's not really for you to say. It doesn't even matter if you pull out the paperwork and it says it right there and you think you're interpreting it right. That's not how laws work, just so you understand. Because most of you don't. Most of you do not understand, and you won't even end up in that time in your life. But if you try to walk around because you visit a law library and you're trying to cite some laws as though you're getting somewhere, you could end up looking like a fool. give you a great example that I just had in my own life. A great example, though, because it'll help open your eyes to many different things. I was doing a real estate deal. My side missed the date. We had a closing date of January 4th. So on January 5th, guess what they did? They put the home back on the market that we had in escrow. And on January 6th, guess what they did? They sold it to somebody else. They sold a home contractually to a new buyer that I have under contract. That is beyond illegal. So I called them, and guess what they told me? They told me to look on page 1 of my contract that I had a closing date of January 4th, and I did not meet it. Today's January 6th. I don't dispute that. I do not dispute that it was the 4th. I do not dispute that I had to close on the 4th. It's right there and it's written down and it is no longer the 4th. I don't dispute any of these things. But guess what? You claiming it or even me agreeing it doesn't make it so. It is now a legal issue. That's what a contract is. It's a legal issue. It doesn't get decided by us. It gets decided by a judge. And there is something in that very contract, 4 pages later, that talks about extenuating circumstance. And I'm going to argue extenuating circumstance as to why I didn't meet the date on the 4th. And by the way, I'm going to put a Liz Penance on your property, and you're not going to sell it to anybody, and you don't even know what a Liz Penance is. But you tried to get cute with me. And you tried to read a contract, and then you tried to interpret it. You don't have the right. That's why I bring this to you. Is you're going to get people from USADA that are going to come on, they're going to tell you what the rule is. Or you're going to get Conor McGregor to come on, he's going to tell you what the rule is. That's not how it works. You can read words the same as I can. We don't know until it gets tested. You have to understand that, though. You have to absolutely understand, because I'll have people look down and go, well, I mean, it says it right here. But it says right there, do you know what that means? And no, you don't until that gets debated. Okay, I feel like I begrudge this enough to let you know that just because you know the words or where you can find some rule doesn't mean you know the application of the rule. And if there's not a precedent, which means this has already been ruled on by a judge or a court somewhere, you can't even begin. You can tell me the intent. You can tell me what you would like it to mean. You can tell me what you plan to argue should we get to this point. I can tell you what I plan to argue, and then we as reasonable people can see whose argument is more likely to be held up, and then we can kind of use that to start working things out. But this, and I got to tell you, I mean, in all fairness, USADA is very good. They are, and they have some very fine people. And they operate with some of the highest members of the United States Senate. John McCain, rest his soul, by example. Right? A couple of votes away from being the most powerful man in the world. That was directly who worked with us. They have some very powerful things. They got beat. It's as simple as that. They got beat. When the lawyers at the UFC did the deal, a lot of the language that the lawyers put, they were just on another level. They were better than USADA. They were smarter than USADA. They had a vision of what could come up and how they would want that stuff. Better than USADA. And they were able to sit with it. And just so you know, these things are done. You're a lawyer, and I'm a lawyer. We come sit down. I'm going, oh, hey, let's put this verbiage in. And this will be very important in case we run into that I create a scenario that is not the one that I'm actually worried about. I get you go, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you put it in now. The verbiage that I just got you to put in. All right, do you understand this? For the scenario and the intent that I took is not at all what I was actually concerned with, which means 8 years down the road when we run into this, I already know the language is there because I'm the one that sat there and got you to put it in. But I mean, this is the way that the game is played. It's the way the game is played. I was 24 years old, and I was taken to court by the Attorney General 7 times. I had no money, and I had just lost my father. I mean, just by example, you know, you get the jam, you go to dad. It's in a different spot. It's in a tough spot. The Attorney General has an endless budget, an endless time. They don't ever lose. They don't lose because they can't lose. You can only take them on for so long. I beat them all 7 times. 7 for 7. I fought them and I won. And they, to this day, do not know what actually happened there. They, to this day, don't know 12 months prior to them suing me in the first place, I was front and center with a congressman. And I had written into the bill, no holds barred. This had to do with me putting on mixed martial arts events. They wrote it into the bill, passed by the House, passed by the Senate, and signed by the governor with me in his presence. But he wrote the words in there, no holds barred. And that was the trap that we laid from day one. Because if you bar one hold, you take yourself out of that definition. And they passed it into law. And I'm only bringing this to you because words matter. Which is why you cannot look at a contract, think that you read it, sit around 3, 4, 5, 6 of your buddies, and think you know what it meant. It doesn't work that way. Most people will wilt. Conor McGregor has made it clear he will not. And I don't know who's right. But nobody does. And we won't until it gets tested. Let me read to you what the verbiage said, just so you understand this. There's no way USADA did it. I got to tell you, there's no way USADA did this. This came by guys that were just better at this. I don't know. It wasn't that. I mean, it doesn't say who wrote it, but this is my prediction that this did not come from USADA. This is something that USADA accepted. An athlete who gives notice of retirement to UFC. Their initials. They used it. They can't. Okay. All right. To UFC, which I believe is going to stand for Ultimate Fighting Championships, though it does not explicitly say, has otherwise ceased to have a contractual relationship with, again, UFC, which I assume, which is always a problem, to stand for Ultimate Fighting Championships, due to an athlete-initiated inactivity. Both the word athlete and inactivity capitalized. Which would lead you to not think that it was a descriptive term, it would be a title to something. Only persons, places, and things do you capitalize, as well as the first word to a sentence. This is none, but it is capitalized. Which would lead you to believe they're not using descriptive words. This is a thing. It's a thing. Bad Guy Inc. You know why the bad and the guy are capitalized? Because that's a thing. That's an entity. It's now a name. It's very interesting, though. In this contract, right next to UFC, which we don't know what that stands for in the contract, right next to that, they have put athlete-initiated inactivity, but they capitalized them. Which means athlete and inactivity may not mean athlete or sportsman inactivity. Oh, I'm busy. It may not. It's capitalized. It means it's a person, place, or a thing, if somebody chose to argue. I'm just sharing with you. A lot of problems here, and I haven't even got to the first period. Okay. Blah, 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 competed in bouts, given the UFC, competed and made himself available for testing for a period of 6 months before returning to competition. UFC, which I believe to mean Ultimate Fighting Championship, may grant an exemption. They may grant an exemption. So now the body that's being tested and overseen by the body has the authority to trump everybody, according to this. They may grant an exception to the 6-month written notice rule in exceptional circumstances or where the strict application of that rule would be manifestly unfair to an athlete, again capitalized. Do you not know what do you not understand? I feel like we're on different wavelengths here. Do you understand if you capitalize it? It's now not athlete. It's not what you guys think. It doesn't have to be. That could be a company. That could be a company that's set up. That could be an LLC. That could be an incorporated. It's capitalized. Not only could it be, it should be. It should be something that is totally different than what the word athlete that we know to mean is. Because they're capitalizing it, which means they made it a person, place, or a thing. Which means it's quite possibly a legal entity. It's a huge mistake. Truly, it's a huge mistake. Provided that either instance, the athlete, again capitalized, This is stunning. Provides a minimum of 2 negative samples, capitalized, that's got to be a typo, right? Now, see, now I'm not thinking this is USADA. This has got to be the bloody elbow people. Okay, samples for return to competition. But you guys understand what this is saying? It is saying, and this is really important that you have this. It's really, really important that you have this, and it'd be very easy for somebody to explain to USADA and get USADA to acquiesce. It would. Because we see this all the time. You guys just don't know it. You don't see it with stars like Conor McGregor. You don't see it with your main event guys. We haven't seen it yet by somebody who was hurt and injured and healed themselves and had rumors. We haven't seen it with them yet, but you see this all the time. You see this rule enacted all the time, which is where Conor comes out and goes, what are you talking about? I can't have one. Why could I not have one? Why would you discriminate against me? You do this all the time. This isn't a unique rule. You guys probably think it is. The way I read it to you and the way it's just now getting posted, you probably think this hasn't been tested yet or that this is some verbiage in there. You'd be wrong. This gets tested all the time. And it goes the way that it was interpreted, which is the UFC can give an exception. Let me just give you an example. You're fighting in Chicago. Got your show in Chicago. Tuesday's the travel day. That's just built in with the industry structure. Media on Wednesday. Get your posters signed. X is going to be Thursday. Again, usually some press conferences and whatnot. Weigh-ins are going to be Friday. I'm just sharing with you, right? Like the week is kind of set up. So let's say you have a travel day and somebody pulled out. Somebody didn't get on the airplane for whatever reason. So now you're going to just grab a local from Chicago. It's just a tremendous opportunity to break into the bigs. And we all know that. But you got to grab somebody quick. Grab this guy. He's got a reputation. He can make the weight class. He has the courage to do it. Hey, congratulations, kid. You're now in the UFC. But he hasn't got to go through the pool. He may not even have time to do his paperwork. We're told that Conor McGregor, who has a team, an entire legal team, he doesn't have his paperwork done. So we're led to believe that it's pretty hard to do. I'm just sharing with you some local yokel from Chicago that gets called last minute. He's got to get over to the arena. He's got to cut 15 pounds before he gets in there with a trained athlete that he wasn't prepared for. I mean, right? He doesn't even have time to do his paperwork. So all the time, we will see that rule get enacted. And we will say that that is manifesting for the athlete, which we can capitalize or not. And I still don't think you understand why that's a big deal. An extenuating circumstance. Sure it was. There's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for that guy. And I'll tell you right now, as the decision maker giving it to him, it's a once-in-a-lifetime. I'm not coming back. I'm in this town. He's in this town. I need him, and there's the cage. Can we make these things happen, or should we part ways? And of course, USADA allows that young man to compete. Of course they do. So Conor McGregor is talking about, why are you going to use it against me? If it was once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, I got one fight left. I'm going to do Michael Chandler. I got an entire TV show. I promised I've got a media tour. I'm right here. Whether I've done the paperwork or not, you've never asked me for a test. And that is going to come, and that's going to be won by Conor. Conor has been in the presence of USADA, and they didn't ask him for a test. And they will come out and falsely tell you, we couldn't ask you for a test, you weren't in the pool. That is absolutely not true, and USADA knows that's not true. They could walk up to him right now and ask him for a test. If he declined, there would then be a question of, do they have authority to punish him for refusal, which is also within the contract. That is very unlikely to hold up for them, but they absolutely could ask him for the test, and they have, many people. And they've gotten the samples, and they've gotten the tests of many people. So this is not Chael's opinion. I can go through the stories for you. And if Conor wanted to bring that up to an arbitrator, say, I have been with USADA. I didn't have my paperwork. They knew I didn't have my paperwork. I had a fight I was training for. If I'm right here, God's sakes, I've never failed a test. I've never turned down a test. They're the ones that conduct the test. Why have they not come and tested me? That's going to hold up. And USADA is going to need to answer that. They really will. They'll have to answer. If you want his say, if you knew he was trying to fight, you had this information. You've got your own verbiage that a guy can notify someone that he's retired, and therefore he is. Your own verbiage says he can notify by text message. He can send a text to a person in authority, which in this case is Dana White, and tell him he's unretired, and therefore legally he is. He can do these things. But you're not going to accept that he's in Nevada, that he's at a training camp, that he's doing a very popular show known as The Ultimate Fighter with a very popular organization known as ESPN. You're not going to accept those things. You'll accept a text message in the dark of night, but you won't accept an announcement on ESPN? You're there, he's here. You never walked up and tested him? You never asked him for a sample? But you have with all these other athletes. And now Conor is saying, I would like to defer to the exceptional clause. And it says that they would need 2 tests. That's what it says. Now, that's an interesting one. It's an interesting one for me because every test is 2 tests. And so that's, again, just something that you could debate. Every single time you see USADA, 2 tests are done. 1 through blood and 1 through urine. And it gets registered as 2 tests, not as 1 test, 1 of blood and 1 urine. It gets registered as 2 tests. So I just bring that to you because it says you got to have 2 tests. And so then that becomes a game. Hey, USADA, go test him. And then, by the way, come back the very next day and test him again. Well, okay, but is that 4 tests? I don't know if it's 4 tests. It might be 2 tests. We don't know. We just want to make sure we're right. Go and do it. What if we don't? What if we don't? It looks like he's going to try to get around this by this clause. But one thing this clause says is I got to have 2 tests. So what if we just don't test him? What if we're mad and we want to be childish about it and we don't go test him? We know that the 2-test rule does not always get applied because many times guys are brought in on short notice and they just simply didn't have time to do the tests. We have a Brock Lesnar situation at UFC 200 where they took the test, but they didn't have the results back. And Mark Hunt to this day is still suing over this. It gets very confusing. But I will tell you right now, USADA is not going to hold up if they did not ask Conor for a test. If they are going to argue that you will accept a retirement or a return by a text message, but you will not accept an announcement on ESPN, that's not going to work. That is not going to work. Wanderlei Silva, by example, was never in the USADA pool in his life. Wanderlei Silva has never entered the USADA pool. Wanderlei Silva served a 4-year suspension. This is a $1 million guy. Wanderlei is $1 million a night every time he walks out there. 3 times a year he's going to get, they banned him for 4. They took $12 million from him. Because when they asked him for a test, he told them no. He said, I'm not with you guys. They don't know you test. I'm not part of your organization. It sounds right. That sounds reasonable. It's not what the courts decided. Gilbert Melendez could not have been more innocent. I've never talked to you guys about Gilbert publicly. Never. He could not have been more innocent. He was working with a doctor. He knew he was going to have to take some. He retired from the sport and left the pool. And the next week they came and tested him. And he was a nice guy. He goes, yeah, I'll give you the test. Hey, by the way, I left the pool because of this. So when they came back to arbitration, Gilbert said, but I wasn't with you guys. And they ruled, you're right. We agree with you. But a sample was still taken and this was still found. And we just can't have that information and not operate on it. And it was now precedence. I just offer you that. Chael Sonnen served a 2-year suspension with USADA. I was never with him. Actually, that isn't true. Later in my life, I did go with him. Prior in my life for the U.S. national team. So I wouldn't fall in the same category as Wanderlei Silva, but I wasn't with them at the time. But it was much like Gilbert. They came to me, they asked me for a test, and I gave them one. Now, many people would tell me the other option, which is I could have told them no. Well, that's what Wanderlei did. I told them yes and was dirty. I did 2 years. Wanderlei has never failed a drug test. Contrary to what you might read on the internet, Wanderlei Silva has never failed a drug test. He served 4 years. I failed for a plethora of, I mean, it wasn't one substance. I had multiple substances. He didn't fail. He got double. And we weren't with them. But this is a precedent, and this is set. And they could have walked up to him. And if they think they're just going to get around it by acting like, hey, silly me, and he didn't have his paperwork in, they could play the dirtiest game that they do play, which is for Conor to plead a case anywhere similar to what it just took me 24 minutes to do. That would take Conor years, quite literally. 2 or 3 years. It would cost him his career. He may not even come back. I mean, but this is the game. This is the game. We let you know this game of chicken we're going to play to the end. And on a local yokel, you'll get him every time. He will have no backing. He won't have the media. He won't have a fan base. He will have nothing. He doesn't have the money, the legal team. He will have nothing. He won't have the promotion. He will be by himself, and he will lose. He will lose. Won't matter if he was right on the merits or not. He will lose to USADA. But this is different. Now you have a guy that's got the backing. He's got the team in place. He will have the promotion itself in his corner. It's a very different situation. Francis Ngannou wants to be a martyr over some kind of contract that made him a multimillionaire. I don't fully get that thing. You want to hear about a martyr? You want to hear about a guy that could actually do good? That could actually change the way things are done and do good for all those boys that sat and had their careers changed just on a threat of leverage by an agency that had endless funding. Conor McGregor's your guy. I hope like hell that this fight comes.